Good morning. How are you today? Good, good. I'm Russ Poulin. I'm the interim co-executive director of WCET, and glad to be here with you today. And I hope that you're having a good time and learning lots from this workshop that we're putting on here. Unfortunately, I had to come in. They had something happen at home and had to come in late yesterday. But I was watching what was going on via Twitter, and this is an active Twitter group, I said, and was finding out all sorts of things from that. I'm going to start off your day with an assignment. Ooh. Bad thing. So some of the things that we want you to do is that, again, we have these pads around here, and we have the Padlet app that you were told about yesterday. And again, what we want you to tell us about is that, are there things that you want to know more about what you've heard? What are some of the aha moments that you got out of this? And then especially that we're trying to figure out, as we move forward, we have our annual conference coming up in Portland in November. We have other virtual events that we could be doing. We have other research that we could be doing on these issues. What are the things that we should be doing next on these issues that would help you? And so we'll take all sorts of ideas. We won't do all of your ideas. I won't promise that. But this is how things work with WCET, is that the best ideas come from you all, and so we'll look at those and try to figure out, what are things that would be very, very helpful in terms of moving forward with this. So please do that, because we can only do great events like this because somebody else a year ago said, you should be doing a session on these sorts of alternative credentials, and so we can thank whoever that was, or the 10 people who did that. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the first session that we have now. And I was noticing on Twitter yesterday when I was following that in the morning that there got to be a whole stream about, what about students? They're really nice to have in this equation somewhere along the line. And so this session is talking about students as we move forward. And so at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Mary Alice McCarthy from the New America Foundation, and we'll talk about students and how they fit in. Thank you all.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here again. What a fantastic day yesterday. My head's still spinning. I was busy jotting down notes late into the night, so it's been a very rewarding experience to be here. And we spent a lot of time yesterday talking about competency-based education and how it enables alternative pathways to degrees and credentials. And then today we want to talk about some of the other things that are available, some of the other vehicles. Okay. Some of the other vehicles that are available to students and to institutions to sort of get credit, or to get credit for the things that they've learned outside of college, which for many of our students, I know as our students get older and more of them have work experience, is more and more important. So we have ways of acknowledging students' learnings and abilities. Some of these ways have been around for a while, like prior learning assessments and challenge exams. Some of these ways are very new and sort of cutting edge and leveraging new technologies like the open badges. And so we're going to hear about some folks who are on the cutting edge and are doing this, and why this is why things like prior learning assessment and alternative credentials have sort of new life, how they relate to the competency-based education discussion, and then how they relate in general to our efforts to improve transitions for students to both good lives and good jobs. So with that, I'm going to introduce Carla Casilli, and did I pronounce that correctly? Okay. Who is on that cutting edge of providing alternative credentials to students. She's the Director of Design and Practice at the Badge Alliance, and here she is.
Thanks, everybody. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you today. I know I've participated in a few sessions already, and they've been really rewarding and wonderful. And I hope today that I'll be able to share a little bit about open badges and the Badge Alliance, which is kind of a new outgrowth of open badges. And so that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be talking for just a few minutes about open badges, for those of you that it's new to, giving you kind of a little bit of grounding in that, and then moving on to talking about the Badge Alliance. So I just like a little raise a hand for everybody who has heard of or is just heard of open badges. I'll just start there. Awesome. And then anybody who's implementing. Thank you. Thank you. I like people who are thinking about it. Excellent. So a little bit about open badges and what they are. And forgive me if this is old news to you. I just want to make sure that we all are starting from the same vantage point. So they are a form of the way that we think about them. They're a form of personal social currency. So a lot of times we talk about badges, we talk about the issuing organizations and how much they need to control them. We like to always reverse that conversation and say the earner is really at the center of this experience. So we like to talk about them as personal social currency, but they can be used in lots of different ways. Professional ways, personal ways, social ways. Badges can be used in lots of different ways. They do act as representations of things. Sometimes I talk about badges as being the idea of the noun at the end of the verb that took place. It's easy to talk about the noun. It's harder to talk about the verb. Sometimes we talk about badges as if they're the thing we're aiming for, when in fact the badge is the representation of the thing that just took place. So representations of achievements, learning, skills, interests, competencies, and that et cetera on there is actually really important because we don't like to put kind of endpoints on the ways that people can use badges. They are stackable lifelong credentials. This is something you're going to hear coming from anybody talking about open badges, the idea that people don't stop learning the minute they walk out of an accredited institution. So these are a way that people can start to keep that information flowing and they can continue to share who they are throughout their entire lives. The other thing is they can connect to different ways. So they can connect to people, they can connect to organizations. In this instance on this slide, you're seeing that they can connect to people like potential employers. So they're always communicating. The other thing that they do is they allow people to start mapping learning pathways. This is one of the beauties of the open badge system, is that, again, taking the perspective of the earner, you can start to see that, oh, well, I'm here, but there are all these other pathways I can go. All of a sudden, the things that seem kind of opaque start to become a lot more transparent, and people can start to see that there are potential futures for them. We like to say that people can try on potential future selves when it comes to looking at badges. The way that we're doing this is through a shared infrastructure. What Mozilla has done is design a universal standard. I think Pete put it really well yesterday. They are a vessel. They hold information. And that universal standard is really important because it allows for interoperability. Without interoperability, everybody goes back to silos. The information stays where it is. It doesn't move around. One of the really important aspects of open badges in general is the allowance of information to move readily across the web the way that people would like to do that, so they can choose how to share their information about themselves. Just a little bit about the actual underpinning of open badges. It's software. You're getting to see some actual metadata on there. So I like to use this slide because it allows people to see that there's actually something that's underpinning all of this. What that software is, so it's metadata, information about information. And this is really the essence of a badge right here. It's a badge name, the URL, that is the description of that badge, the criteria, what goes into that badge, the badge image, so obviously. Sometimes people think of badges as they're just an image. That's actually not accurate. Badges actually carry all of this information with them everywhere they go. So every time you see an actual open badge, and I will distinguish that there are a difference between open badges and just digital badges. Open badges have this whole ethos behind them about open. It's an open source tool. It's free. Not all of them will be free, but right now, badge images, the issuer, who's the issuing organization, who's the person behind the person saying that this is meaningful to us, the issue date, then the recipient, who's the person who actually got this badge. Each badge is actually personalized. So when I earn a badge, it's a Carla Casilli badge. It goes directly to me. It is something that contains information about me and not someone else. Along those lines, I'll skip down and talk about the evidence URL. That's something that points to information that I've done specifically about earning that badge. So the great thing about badges is they can be evidence-based. When someone presents you with a badge and there's evidence attached to it, that evidence is about the work that they have done, which actually gives people, like employers, great insight into what it is people are capable of doing. That evidence can be anything. It can be a video. It can be a PDF. It can be a paper. It can be a reference to a whole bunch of other materials. So there's lots of ways that badges can grow as they need to. And then a little bit about, so that's kind of the Open Badges view, and then a little bit about who we are now as the Badge Alliance. The Badge Alliance is really an outgrowth of Mozilla Open Badges. So the core team who is working on Mozilla Open Badges has actually moved to the Badge Alliance now. We are not actually publicly launched, so we launch in June. And you can go to the site, but it's a shell site. If you do go to the site, there is a form there that actually encourages you to sign up for what we call working groups. A little bit about how working groups work in just a second. So we are a network of organizations. So instead of just being one organization kind of funneling everything through, we've moved to the perspective that let's get everybody who's interested in badges in some area or another into working groups so that they can have their ideas heard and shared. We're interested in developing an Open Badges ecosystem, and that takes a lot of people, so not just Mozilla anymore. It's framed on a constellation model. What that means is there are a variety of different organizations out there that the Badge Alliance connects, and we make sure that all of the conversations are being heard across the entire ecosystem. And these are all of our current working groups. Now, we are actually having an explosion of working groups right now. But just briefly about who they are, it's the Open Badges standard, so the people who are interested in defining what the Open Badge is, what that software is, and how it works. Endorsement, and Deb Everhart, who's here, is actually our chair of our endorsement working group. And that's the idea of what happens when when an organization issues badges, and then someone else really likes those badges, who's another organization, they can actually endorse that whole set of badges. So this is where you start to get the idea of kind of crowdsourced accreditation, where people are saying, these badges make sense to us, we actually are going to sign our names to it, which means that instead of just one organization issuing that badge, you then have multiple organizations who say, all of this makes sense to us, we accept these badges. And that is where you start to see real growth in interoperability. Workforce, how can we connect badges to workforce and make sure that what's happening out there, and you'll hear in a little bit from Grady about some of the work badges that he's been experiencing. And then K-12, higher ed, messaging, globalization. We don't want badges to just exist only in the US. We want them to be a universal standard, universal in the fact that it's just Earth. And then policy, there are ramifications when you start dealing with data like this. So what are the ramifications associated with that? Digital and web literacy, this is a huge area. There are lots of people interested in educating people towards this. How can we make sure that badges work within that environment? Research, how can we guarantee that these badges are actually doing the things everybody thinks they're doing? And then cities, there are lots of cities I mentioned briefly yesterday, cities who are starting to implement badges citywide. We want to make sure that those conversations continue and they are fruitful for everyone. And then finally, teacher badges. And these are not in any specific order, by the way. But recognizing that there's a lot of professional development that occurs, and let's recognize the people who are doing all of this teaching and helping people along the way. So those are our initial working groups. If you'd like to become a member of any of those working groups, as I mentioned, you can go to the badgealliance.org website and sign up on our form. So our goal is really to foster an ecosystem where learning is connected across contexts, subjects, and lifetimes. And that is the Badge Alliance and Mozilla in a nutshell. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Carla. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Grady Cope, who is the president of Reata Engineering, and I hope I said that right, an engineering firm in Denver, Colorado, who has been advising some community college partners in Denver, and is going to talk to us about his experience with recruiting folks and badges and credentials. Thanks.
Thank you. It's really great to be here. Education's been really a big part of my life. Just to let you guys know, I'm not the traditional student, which hopefully could become maybe more of a traditional process. When I got out of high school, I went to Denver Automotive and Diesel College to learn to be a diesel mechanic. I'm sure my parents cringed when I told them that that was my decision not to go to college, but it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. When I graduated from there, I went and I left Colorado and I went to South Texas. There was an oil and gas boom in the Gulf then, and I worked offshore for 5 years. Gained incredible experience and knowledge, and also realized that I did not want to do that the rest of my life. So I came back and I tried to, I wanted to be an engineer. But since I didn't know that in high school, I didn't pay attention so much in math and science. So I first went to the School of Mines, and they didn't really laugh at me when they looked at my transcript and my history, but they suggested that I maybe go to CU Denver, that they could maybe help me. CU Denver is not a traditional, what at that point was not a traditional, and I don't think they still are. They did a lot of night classes and stuff, and a lot of classes were catered towards students that were older and non-traditional, going back to get their college or their bachelor's degree or their master's degree. I went down there. They didn't laugh at me, but they told me I had to go as a special student, and that was okay. That was. Actually, they laid it all out. I had to go as a special student. Then after I think 12 hours of that, I had to get into the College of Liberal Arts, and then I had to apply to the College of Engineering after so many hours. I went through all that process, which was actually a really good process, and gave me the tools that I ultimately graduated with. And I graduated top of my class when I got out, and I made straight A's in math and science. So it just shows when you know what you want to do. In high school, I was making D's in math and science. In college, I was making A's because I knew how I wanted to apply myself at that point. I left there and I went out to work in industry for the Gates Rubber Company. And after about 5 years of that, I started Reata Engineering and Machine Works. We're a contract engineering and manufacturing company. We were 20 years old last October. But with that experience that I've had of both. We call it, we joke about it, we call it the carpet side and the concrete side of the business. And being able to operate in both of those areas is now becoming much, much more of a blurry line, because in my industry, manufacturing, we have tons of jobs open and available. We cannot fill them. And it's because it's not, if I asked everybody in the room about manufacturing, it'd be really interesting. How many of you think we're a smokestack group these days? Come on, be honest. Well, it's not. I tell kids, and part of our job is to go through the K through 12 to get them interested in technical education and engineering education. I tell them it's like playing a 3D video game, but it's not virtual. It's happening in real life. Things are going. It's not an environment, a dirty environment like you think. It's a clean environment. In many cases, it is an environment. Some of these machines are operating in clean rooms. It's a really cool industry, and if you're into things and watching how things are made, it's a wonderful way to do it. But the education level for all of those positions now are much higher. There's much more required. It's not, you're not just moving things from a line to that. The critical thinking, creativity, innovation, changing the way you absolutely do something to something so far outside of the box that nobody would, it takes somebody that has this incredible creativity to do that is what's required of the people today. We don't have, there's not, I don't expect a college, a community college, a technical school, anything to provide me with a student that I can plug in. I realize there's got to be on-the-job training, but they have to develop the skills at college that allow them to come in and have, know how to problem solve. Engineering taught me nothing but problem solving. When I came out of there, everybody asked me, what did college teach me? It taught me how to problem solve. It taught me how to think differently. It taught me how to think critically. And that's what's so missing. We've got credentialing programs. The NIMS has come out. It's not very big in Colorado at this point. But it's a credentialing system where the students can, if they want to be a machinist, they can. They go and they take the courses and they test out of them, and then they've got credentials. When I see those on a resume, I know what level that person is in terms of skill level, what they should be able to do. But they still don't have, I don't know if they can work in a team. I don't know how well they can problem solve. They could take a test and they could learn the initial stuff. But there's all these other things that come into play, and I think it's important now as we move forward with trying to get people out into the workforce is we think differently about how do we, what are all the alternatives to get people out there, because they're not all going to go through a 4-year college program. Some of them may only go through 2 years. I would love every one of them to get to a terminal degree, at least of a bachelor's, and I would encourage all of them to go back. Anybody in my workforce that wants to go back to college, we will help them. But it's important, and what's more important is it's probably sad that I'm the only business person here. I hope that's not true, but I'm constantly getting on anybody that works in business. We're always complaining that nobody's providing us with students to take on jobs, and it's our fault. We're not out there. I'm sure you guys all have advisory committees. I hope that all the people on your advisory committee show up to all the meetings. They probably don't. It's probably just a select few. It's time for that select few to get on the others. We complain about it, we say we need it, but we don't come out there and we don't tell you what we need, we don't help you, we don't volunteer, we don't take students on that are identified, that need to come to the workforce, that need help, that maybe they can't afford college, they need to work part-time. So part of my job these last couple of years has been to go out and really try to attract leaders in business to get involved with the universities and the colleges and the technical schools, and to also drive some sort of, everything gets all dysfunctional. Everybody's like, well, what do you want? What do you need? And it gets crazy, but you guys are pretty good at facilitating meetings like that and driving us to get us to know what we really want and need, and it's just getting us to those meetings. So don't give up on asking. I would tell you that one email won't do it. As soon as that email falls off the screen that day, it's forgotten about. So don't think that you're bantering us. Just keep an email flow constantly going. Count down to the meeting. We are 1 week away from the meeting. We are 4 days away from the meeting. We are 1 day away from the meeting. Please be here. Your attendance is, and yes, you can do conference calls, but those are horrible. I mean, people, when you're on a conference call, a lot of times with business, they are working in the background on their computer. They're not paying full attention. So get them to the facility. And if it's a morning meeting, if afternoon, find out what works best. Drive industry to your institutions and get them involved. They need to be involved. They want to be involved, but they say they're too busy. They're not. Just keep that drive up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Grady. Okay, and next we have Steve Ernst, who's the Vice President of Innovation and Strategy at Excelsior College. Excelsior College has been delivering a is one of the pioneers in competency-based education in the nursing field, and has been finding lots of innovative ways for years to give people credit for what they know when they come in for their adult students. So, Steve, come here.
Thanks, Mary Alice. Thanks, too, to WCET. Well, isn't this a fantastic venue? I don't know if many of you took time while you were walking over or whatever and looked out the windows. I mean, just the beautiful venue and the Wasatch Range outside. If you've ever never had a chance to go up, for example, Little Cottonwood Canyon, just fantastic. Perfect example of a glacial valley, carved beautifully. Just take advantage of that if you can. Anyway, on to the main course, if you will. Relative to the alternative means, I think it's quite telling relative to WCT having both Empire State and Excelsior on this panel. We have been innovators in this space since our founding, both institutions in the early 70s. We were given a very unique mandate from the Board of Regents of the state of New York. Somewhat different, but similar, and it's allowed a lot of innovation. In fact, a lot of my colleagues at Excelsior, I've only been there a little over a year, but they would tell me, well, we go to conferences and we just have to we'd stand off in a corner because we were so out of the mainstream. And they said that all of a sudden about 3 years ago that changed. And all of a sudden people find us and they're rallying around just asking question after question after question. There is a sea change happening in the industry, in higher education, in education at large. And within that context, I firmly believe Excelsior has the right model at the right time. And so I'd like to describe a few elements of that And then Nan, I know, is eager to share with you some of the unique models that are manifest at Empire State. So real quick, we are a private, nonprofit, open access online higher education institution. We're fully online. We're regionally accredited through Middle States. We have the full comprehensive array of degree programs, but do have niches within the online space. We know we are not all things to all people. And we recognize that. Again, founded in 1971, we have over 150,000 graduates. We have current enrollment of about 37,000 students. The average age of students at Excelsior is 37 years old. They come to Excelsior with an average of credits from 5 different institutions. So we're dealing with this sea of transfer and evaluation. That's core of who we are. That's core of who we were set up to be. In the initiation of Excelsior, we had 0 residency requirement. That has created a great advantage for us relative to the space that we work in. We have a very highly personalized learning and services model. We're also very affordable and very proud of that. For example, we have the largest nursing program in the U.S., if not the world, the Associate's Degree Nursing Program. It was competency-based. It started almost 38, 39 years ago. It grew to the largest without any financial aid. In other words, it was not qualified for students financially, yet it grew to become the largest in the U.S., if not the world. So it can happen. We don't. Financial aid is very much needed. It's worthwhile. It's something that we all need to pay attention to. But we can operate in different modalities relative to getting back to the student. What do our students need? Anyway, I'll go over those. Some of our founding philosophy is very, very important. What you know is more important than where or how you learned it. That is so important, and it's manifest in everything we do at Excelsior. And so a little bit, the alternative models that we have, there's really 4 main options. One is prior learning assessment. I'll go into a little bit of detail there. Second, credit by exam, competency-based education, and our online courses. A key point, all the 4 of those models leverage a common learning outcomes and competency framework. That is so important. I'll describe some of that when I talk about, for example, prior learning assessment. Also, we have, again, that very low residency requirement. Right now, our residency requirement has been increased. We have 4 credit residency requirement, a capstone experience, and a digital literacy. You must demonstrate competency in digital literacy. Those are the only requirements we have, residency requirement. Prior learning assessment. We leverage Learning Counts at Cale. They have been a wonderful, active partner with us, and we really, really have appreciated working closely with them. And by the way, they've rolled out a new model for Learning Counts, and if you haven't looked at that in a while, I highly recommend you go back and look at it. It made it easier on the institution, easier on the student, easier on the groups that they're working with, for example, maybe an employer or whatever, relative to documentation of particular skills and then tying that to academic credit. We also, though, do on a very regular basis evaluation and transfer of non-academic credit. We have an office dedicated to just like that. We have, for example, an exclusive agreement with a very large fast food industry. You would recognize them. We work with them at the managerial level. We go in and evaluate what they've learned on the job and how that's been validated. And then we set up an evaluation and transfer process so that they get credit for that in academic programs. Now again, that learning outcome framework is really important because they might not get credit. We don't tie credit back to a particular class. Rather, we tie credit back to the learning outcome or competency framework. So they might only get 1 credit or even 1/3 of a credit, if you will, relative to this piece. So it's all chunked, if you will. And that's really important relative to those types of evaluation strategies and transfer capabilities. Credit by exam. We have a long-standing credit by exam program, and in fact, our nursing program was born of that 38 years ago in competency-based framework. We worked with industry partners. They were and still are a key component in our learning outcome framework, our competency framework. Anyway, we have a whole body of exams. They're high-stakes exams. They're psychometrically evaluated. There's various study options relative to preparing for the exams, and then they're proctored right now in Pearson VUE environments. The third area is competency-based ed. Again, we've been doing this for 38 years. We are also rolling out new models of competency-based ed. We always want to continue to evolve relative to best practices in the industry. The key component here, because there's been a lot of questions about competency-based ed, the key component is it's time independent. Now, obviously, if you're looking at financial aid requirements, you have to have some time restrictions in terms of how long an individual can take to show student academic progress, SAP, right? We have also within that a very detailed learning outcomes and competency unit framework, more detailed than what we have on our online courses, but still it does leverage that common framework. Ours is based on credit hour. All of our competency-based ed programs are based on credit hour rather than competency unit structure. You really go one of two ways, credit hour or competency unit structure. We decided to stay within the credit hour. The reason being is, remember, our students come to us with, on average, credits from 5 different institutions. On average, today, our baccalaureate-oriented student comes to us with 70 credits. It's very difficult in the current competency unit structures to matriculate those students in or out if they decide to leave early before. So really the competency unit structures, those models, you're really all in or all out. Well, this allows us the greater flexibility within that. So that's the model that we've decided to pursue. These are faculty mediated rather than faculty led. And they leverage adaptive learning frameworks. So we have adaptive learning platforms, but also projects and simulations to assess and validate those competencies. We also then have our standard online courses, which are time dependent. In other words, they have a term structure. They have, again, they still use the learning outcomes framework, a little bit higher level. They are faculty led rather than faculty mediated, and they incorporate, again, adaptive learning projects and simulations on an as-needed basis versus being the core relative to competency-based ed. So I'll leave it at that and turn it over to Mary Alice.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. And now for our last speaker, before we start our discussion, is Nan Travers, who's the Director of College-Wide Academic Review at Empire State College. And Empire State, as Steve said, is one of the early pioneers, has been leading in this movement for a long time, and I think Nan's going to share some exciting work with us.
So I'm lucky because I'm coming after Steve, so he set things up nicely for me, and I don't have to say quite as much. So again, we're neighbors. There's actually there's 7 institutions in the Northeast that all started in the early 70s, focused on the adult learner. And we call each other our sister schools, and recently we have been doing even more together. We realize that we really are not, we're less in competition with each other and are much better off sort of coming together and supporting each other. So thank you, Steve. With Empire State College, we have a slightly different model, and I just wanted to highlight that because I really want to talk also about some other work that we're doing. So we have over 20,000 students that are across 34 locations within New York. About half of that is face-to-face. The other half is online, and that reaches every state in the United States as well as around 50 countries. So we're also widespread. And we do offer associate bachelor's and master's degree. The unique thing about our institution is the way that we do our programs. We've never called it competency-based because first of all, that kind of terminology wasn't around originally, but since the beginning of our institution, all of our undergraduates, and now that we have master's programs, some of our master's programs also, they design their own degree. So what we've developed are learning outcomes, competencies, however you would like to term it, that are organized under 13 areas of study. And the student takes those, we actually call them guidelines, But they take these learning outcome statements, and what they're doing is designing a degree. They have to take there's one required course on the undergraduate side, which is called educational planning, and in that they learn how to do this. Every one of our faculty members are guiding their students through this process. Prior learning assessment is part of that. In the same way that Steve was talking, that on average our bachelor students bring in around 70 credits through any form of prior learning. So we accept standardized exams, anything that ACE has evaluated, the National College Credit Recommendation Service, NCCRS, as well as we also go out and evaluate training that different organizations do. Excelsior does as well. We've created a consortium of those institutions that do that in the Northeast, and that will be growing. In fact, we're in Boston tomorrow with a meeting on that. So also, though, with our individualized prior learning assessment, because students are designing their own degree, we do not have to do course match, which is really what the Learning Counts model is. And as long as the students are demonstrating that they have college-level learning, it doesn't even have to be on somebody's curriculum. So we have some learning that fits outside of traditional curriculum that we also want to be able to recognize, because if it is college-level, then we feel it should be. So we've been really working on trying to think through, and that's where I'm going with that one. But just to give you a sense of how many of our students are doing the portfolio process, is that at any one day, if I go into our database, I've got between 4,000 and 5,000 students doing portfolio-based assessments. So, we're talking about a fairly large scale, and I understand, I think we are probably the largest in the United States for the portfolio piece. And as part of that also, students can design their own studies. So our faculty actually say that it's the best professional development that they could have, because working with the students, they learn so much from the students as they're designing the degrees. They're learning all about how curriculum can go about. I mean, students are actually coming out with the skill of being able to design curriculum. Our faculty on a daily basis have to think about curriculum. We have multiple layers of review, so every degree is reviewed by a faculty committee. Our prior learning assessment recommendations from the evaluator is also reviewed. There are also administrative offices that review on up to central office, and I have staff that do the final review. So with this, we really have a kind of a different culture here. There is a residency requirement that is a very small residency requirement, so that we still are able to bring in an enormous amount of advanced standing. Now, some of the things that have been changing in our environment is from the Suny perspective, we now have what's called Open Suny, which is really looking at how to open access to students across the whole system. Suny has 64 institutions in the system, and 30 of those are community colleges. The other 34 are either comprehensive 4 years or universities. So at this point with Open Suny, and if you go to their website, which is open.suny.edu, what we're doing is we're providing access to everything that's online. We're also providing 100% online programs, and 100% competency-based programs are beginning to be developed. We have one ourselves in technology that is part of the Open Suny effort. But there are some other efforts as well. There is a open textbook piece of Open Suny. There's also Suny Complete, which what we're doing is right now, Empire is kind of heading this up, but we are reaching out to students who are really have completed 3 years of the 4 years of the baccalaureate degree, and are finding ways to help them come back, waiving some of the residency requirements, and doing some creative work with those students to get them back. And then in addition to that, we have a section called Suny Real, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about that some more. In addition, I just want to point out that also at Empire we created a journal which is called PLAO, Prior Learning and Assessment Inside Out, and that you can find at plao.org. This is the first journal that is completely focused on prior learning assessment. It is both peer-reviewed for part of it and practitioner-based for the other part. So we have two sides to it. I really encourage that you go and check out. We have 3 volumes up right now, 3 issues. We're working on our 4th, which is about to come out, and the new call for the 5th one will be coming out as well. But this is a place that all of you can start to be published with the kinds of efforts that you're doing, or even looking at, what are the questions, what are the things that you're dealing with. So I just wanted to bring that up, and I'm a co-editor for that. So we also have had a TACT grant, and Empire State College has had a piece of that grant. And what I've just completed is working with all 30 SUNY community colleges. And what we've done is a full analysis of everybody's policies and procedures around prior learning assessment. And in that, we discovered a forgotten policy that was from 1976 that already set it up for a system-wide policy on prior learning assessment. So actually, SUNY has had one since 1976, and it's a very forward-thinking one. We barely had to make some changes to it. However, we modernized language and things like that. So that is now in process for a renewal of that policy. We're in the middle of developing system-wide professional development on PLA. It will be part of Open SUNY, and we're kind of looking at it as really an OER on professional development. And as part of that, we are evaluating 7 different advanced manufacturing certifications. Then we also have a Lumina grant, which is also under SUNY Real, and I want to go right into our website. This is now an open website. There are, so I just want to move this up a little bit and see if I can do that. I'm sorry, I'm used to a Mac, and so I can't manage. Okay, I'll forget it. So this is open for everybody at this point, and it's esc.edu/, we got the /SUNY -real. The SUNY Real is considered the center for the recognition of experiential and academic learning. There's some debate about changing the name again, but anyways, that's what it is right now. And it's really focused on being able to assess learning acquired from anywhere, anytime, and in any way. So what we're trying to think about is how to take prior learning assessment to the 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. I want to push it. And so I've built this whole project around some research that I've been doing and looking internationally. So what we've done is, the whole question was, what is college level learning or university level? We're doing college-university level learning because if we said college, the universities were saying this isn't for us, it's for, they immediately assumed community colleges. If we said university, then the community colleges weren't there. And if we said higher education level learning, we didn't like the acronym. So we went to anyway, so what we've got here is that we started looking at all different kinds of frameworks that already were looking at this. So we looked at Lumina's DQP, we were looking at AAC&U's, all their liberal education and their value rubrics, and then we started looking at other countries as well. So we pulled together the data looking at over 90 different countries. These are all the countries that had frameworks that we could get translated into English. There are some that we missed because we couldn't get a translation. But we did an extensive analysis of this. We had an academic team of faculty, and then we also had a team of expert panel that we called, experts from around the U.S., and Patrick Lane is one of our expert panelists from WICHE. So we've been able to pull people together, and what we've done is we laid out all of the frameworks, everything that everybody was saying was college-level learning, analyzed it, synthesized it, and came down to this framework. This framework is constantly under kind of changes. I hope it always will keep getting evolved. So we just had a retreat about a week and a half ago, and meta-literacy has now been changed to integration because we felt that people were having trouble understanding what we were talking about. And so it's now knowledge, engagement, and integration as sort of the structure of it. So those are sort of the overarching concepts, and then we have 8 learning domains. The way this is coming up, it's hard to see the whole graphic at the same time. This is a hot graphic, so I can hit it any place. But basically what we're saying is that if somebody has college or university level learning, they have some specialized knowledge, they know how to apply it, they can integrate it, they can communicate it, they have a way of gaining more information, so they're doing some research and bringing in that information. They have a sense of some ethical responsibility. They also have a social, cultural, and civic engagement around it, and they engage their learning. And so when you see all of that together, then we're really talking about something that is a college or university level. So then what we did is, I'll go into any one of these. What we did is when we gathered the data, we were able to, a lot of the frameworks across the world are set up at different levels, so we retained that information. And as we condensed and synthesized all of the data, what we did is we retained. And so each one of these learning domains, what we've done is we have created the learning outcomes or competencies. We call them actually learning descriptors because we wanted to get away from some of the debate about what was an outcome, what was a competency. And we've got that at a lower level, our introductory level, or an upper level or advanced level, so that there's a way to start to make a distinction there for institutions as they go to assess learning. Then we were really faced with the fact that these are very comfortable statements for faculty, for higher ed. You know, we're really in good shape there. And all of the frameworks we looked at were from that direction. There was nothing for the student. And we were really concerned that if we didn't have a framework that students could use as well, then there was a problem. So what we did is we developed a set of questions for each of these as well. We call them learning prompts. And therefore, as the students can use these prompts, that this is directly related to those learning outcomes. So again, they're able to understand it. We also was doing a lot of reading around evidence and realized that people have a hard time understanding what good evidence is about. And so we've just begun to develop examples. We're hoping this will grow over time and people will add to it. So we've done this for each and every one of these, but then the other thing we realized as we were, you know, going along here and saying, 8 times these amount of questions, no student is ever going to want to engage in this whole thing. And so we had to kind of step back from it again. So what we did is that we've been developing a e-portfolios, and I'm just flipping to here instead of, I'm going to go, we're actually doing it in both Mahara and Pebblepad, and the reason for that is twofold. Our institution uses the Moodle Mahara because it is open source, but it also does not have, Mahara does not have a evaluation side to it, so we also wanted to experiment with a e-portfolio system that had an evaluation side to it. Let me just sign in here so I can get it loading. And Pebblepad is an e-portfolio system that no one else in the United States is using right now. It was, we're the first group that's using it, and that should have opened this. So let me hit that again. There we go. And with Pebblepad, it's been 10 years. It's out of the UK. It's completely across Europe, Australia, other places. The kind of the cool thing about Pebblepad is well, first of all, they have an area called Atlas, which is Academic Teaching, Learning, and Assessment System, where you can actually create a whole environment for the student and the faculties. And then it's also, they were already aware of prior learning assessment, and so it's built with this idea of being able to document your learning and provide evidence. So I'm going to quickly just show you, because I know the time is up, but I just want to show you very quickly what we've done here, and it kind of gives you a sense of what we've been doing. So what we've been doing in both Mahara and in here is creating really a workbook, and the workbook is layered. It scaffolds the student through it, so they go through describing what have I learned, and then how have I learned it, and then how do I use it. And we've taken those questions and built them into a template area, and it digs them deeper and deeper, so it guides them and scaffolds them through it, as well as provides, these are areas that you provide evidence so that you can attach your evidence. We're in the middle of testing this out. We have 4 pilots. 3 of them exist within Empire State College, and then one of them we have with Sailor Academy, and right now we have, I think, around 25 Sailor Academy students testing this out. It's part of a study, so they have to give us feedback, but we're right in the middle of that. So what we're hoping is that you all will go to that website. The framework that is there is open. It's part of Creative Commons. So all we ask is that you take it, experiment with it, give us feedback. Thank you.
All right, lots to think about. So I think we have some microphones going around, and I hope you all have some great questions. I'm just going to kick off with a question while we get those microphones circulating for the panel. And one of the things that I'm struck by, and actually it came up, Nam, when you were talking, is that, prior learning assessment and challenge exams and giving credit for prior learning, just like competency-based education, is not new. And in fact, in the 1970s, there was a big push around prior learning assessment. But it all kind of went away, and now we're doing archaeology and we're finding these laws and these nice things that are there. And it's like, oh, someone did think about this before us. So what happened, and how do we make sure that doesn't happen again? What's different now? Is it different? Are we going to find ourselves 10 years from now, or 30 years from now, being like, there's this thing called prior learning assessment. They were talking about it in 2014.
So one of the things that I think has happened is some great work that CALE has done around kind of lobbying, getting people more aware of it, but also the study that they did in 2009 to this day is the largest data set of students showing the impact of prior learning assessment on retention, persistence, graduation. And so for the first time, there's been actual evidence as to why this might be a good idea. Also, the economics right now has really switched a lot of institutions to start focusing on the adult. So, Excelsior and Empire State, as well as Thomas Edison, Charter Oak, quite a few of the institutions that have been doing this for a while. I mean, as Steve mentioned, we would be in a room, people would go over, they'd be talking there, when I said that we don't have course match, people would never want to talk to me. Now, because of the competency-based movement as well, it becomes a real important piece of it. So we are developing a lot of research. I'm the U.S. representative on a Prior Learning International Research Center, and we're developing a whole lot of research on that. We've got a couple books out. So we're finally being able to talk about it in a way that isn't this a cool idea, or, we're just so out of being the mainstream, but that we actually have been able to develop a good evidence base around the impact of prior learning.
I'll add to that as well, a little bit on a more macro level. I think a couple important points why we're at the stage we're at. One, I'll even go back to No Child Left Behind. In other words, what are the outcomes of what we provide as education? And right now it's kind of a black box. And the whole outcomes movement was really started to take off some of those elements of the black box. So you could look inside and say, are these students that we have care for and nurtured for, are we providing them with relevant outcomes and competencies for lifelong learners, not just the next job, if you will? And how do you measure that? And so that's part of that trend, and you've seen that bubble up, the whole learning outcomes, student outcomes frameworks bubble up, both in terms of accreditors taking on, both in terms of institutions taking on, also in terms of government regulation. So that whole outcomes movement, I think, is playing a big part in terms of all of a sudden competency-based coming to fore. Also, obviously, there's the time independent nature of it. In other words, Why would I, as a student, say if I'm coming in and I have, my gap is huge relative to attaining or demonstrating mastery, and another student's coming in that has a lot of skills relative to me and doesn't need as much classwork or whatever, or training, even in one particular subject? Why should we be in the same class, or why should that student have to wait for me to catch up to him or her, right? So that whole time-independent nature is also part of it. Third, then, is industry. I really think that industry is starting to play a bigger role in terms of wanting to understand what these outcomes are and how it pertains to them. They've been crying on the sidelines saying, hey, you're not giving us the student we need. They're becoming more active participants with us in this venture, and that's a good thing. It's a very good thing, because again, it focuses on these outcomes. What are those outcomes? They're still hard outcomes to define. What is critical thinking? What is problem solving? We are a long way from being able to objectively define what those are, but it doesn't mean we should stop trying. We need to work with those industry partners to help validate what those are.
So if I can jump into, I think the internet has done a huge amount for changing the game, and that as people, a few things. One, people don't stay in jobs very long anymore. We just had this conversation. The average length of someone staying in a job these days is about 3 years. So you're going to have this constant changeover, so the idea of prior learning assessment is going to come every time you switch jobs. And not just switch jobs, but switch careers, and that's pretty significant. So career transition, I think, is going to be driving a lot of this. And obviously, coming from industry, I think that's a significant aspect. But then I think all of the other aspects of being able to learn in different ways are now much more manifest than they were in 1970. And not that things weren't happening in 1970, but I think the access to things is dramatically changed at this point. And not only that, it's that true global sense has significantly changed, so that now we have things that are being outsourced elsewhere. The knowledge economy does not exist in any one location, and I think that has a significant role as well.
So probably why these things come and go, if we could probably look at what was going on in the economy, or what was going on and how many people were in the workforce in those types, in those time frames, would probably show a lot. And I will tell you probably why it's come up so big now is that there's jobs available out there, but there's people that either don't have the skill set or don't think they have the skill set, so they don't even try to apply for the jobs. Hopefully they're looking or being encouraged to look back to the educational institutions to say, where can I learn? Which would be an awesome way of, again, it's part of industry's job to push people to say, school's a great thing and keep it involved. But if we had the ability of, I think one of the struggles with older people going back to school is they don't realize how smart they are on many things. They don't realize how competent they are on many things, and they're afraid that they're going to go back there and they're going to find out that they're not important enough. So there's a fear there. But if they do go back, I can remember when I went back to college. Now I was 24 at the time, so I was still pretty young. But I remember I had to test into which English I would be in 101 or 102, and I had to take a written essay. I hadn't written since high school, so 5 years had gone by and I hadn't written an essay. So I wrote my essay, and you came back 2 days later and they said, you're in 102. And I argued with them. I said, no, there is no way I should be in 102. I have to be in 101. and I even went to the point of having a meeting with the department head saying there's no way. And they said, no, this is fine. But I didn't believe in myself enough. And I guarantee you the older you get, the more that happens. So if there's competency-based testing or competency-based experience, those would be awesome things to be able to figure out a way to measure and even subjectively measure.
Great. Looks like we've got a question.
Actually, I wanted to just expand on that. I think everybody said the right thing. it never did go away. As a founding board member at Cale back in the dark ages, we developed principles of good practice. They have been expanded to incredible work at Empire State and other places. It never went away. What's changed is we could never scale it. It was boutique. We, at the Community College of Vermont, we used to carry around cartons of paper. This is just when Xerox machines are being invented. I mean, you got to understand where we were. You couldn't do more than 10 people at a time. And so why is it happening now? Because it can happen. And the long tail, the data, you can move it at the flick of a finger around the world, get subject matter experts on it, use whatever modality you want to use. Why is it happening? Because it can. And no longer can traditional faculty ignore it because there's just too much information out there. So the tipping point has come and gone.
Great. Looks like we got some more.
Follow-on point to Peter. The other thing that the technology is enabling in big data is to actually go out and have systems that know what jobs are out there and what skills they require, and give students a framework for mapping what their current skill sets are, whether or not those skill sets are validated by degrees, and help individuals or people working with them with that gap analysis and matching. Well, you'd be a good match for this job if you had these 3 skills, and here's where you can go to train for those 3 skills. That kind of data and technology infrastructure just wasn't possible before.
Great. Looks like.
Your low residency requirement that you have. So I'm wondering, are you able to do that because you're using the PLA credit that's awarded as part of the residency, or are you literally able to award degrees with only 4 credits awarded by your institution?
The institution, per its founding, enables that. In other words, we were founded as an aggregator. We offered no classes on our own. We would work with students that was under the Regent's degree. They would come in and we would say, well, you might go here for this, over here for that, over here for that. So it was in part due to our founding. Now it's a distinct advantage. Having said that, though, our students are matriculating with us earlier and earlier and earlier. So while that may occur for very few students, I don't have the percent on hand, that only might take 4 credits with us. It's a rarity anymore. They're with us for a much longer period.
Looks like we've got a question in the back there.
You said that we were just talking about the fact that we use terminology. We all use the same terminology, but it all means different things to each one of us. And so would you please explain the difference for you between your courses that are faculty mediated and faculty led? What is the difference between those two?
Yes, the faculty-led are, for us, our traditional courses are fully online. We have an average class size of less than 20 and 8-week or 15-week terms, and faculty lead that. It's very much a Socratic method within that environment, and they are monitoring and leading each student in a time-dependent manner. The faculty mediate is really where and they're really the guide on the side, because these students are coming and going at all different points, and they're going to be at all different points relative to this. And so the faculty member is watching each student as they progress through this, using analytics that's provided to them, and projects, watching what's happening in terms of the grading environment. So they're truly mediating, if you will, each student. They're guiding, if you will, as well, but they're not leading a cohort through at any given time.
This is a question for Grady, and I was curious, what sort of skills is it that you're seeing that you would hope that would come from education or from colleges, and how would competencies and badges and this whole discussion, how would that help you in the future if we did the right things?
So the skills, I use the term problem solving, critically thinking. You guys probably hear that all the time. Those are so important, and I don't know that there's any one course or class that teaches that, but it's kind of a combination of all. The biggest weaknesses we're seeing now are the lack of math skills and science skills. I would say, you know, I think texting and emailing and the internet have changed where people are fairly good communicators in terms of writing and things like that. Grammatically and things may not be perfect, but they're fairly good. Most of our people communicate by leaving notes between shifts and stuff, and we don't get many complaints about that. And I think that's probably one of the wonders of the internet and what that's done. But I will tell you that math and science skills are extremely lacking throughout. My wife has an electrical engineering company, and the engineers there are awesome at their math and science skills, but many of the other people that she brings on, they're lacking way behind in those areas, and we are as well. And I don't mean that they need to have calculus or anything like that. They just need to have basic understanding of you know, some of that, and that brings the problem solving back full circle. And the critical thinking is just the ability to look at a problem and say, are we doing the right thing? Do we need to stop what we're doing, move over here, and change perspectives or whatever? You all would know much better than I if that can be taught, but I really believe that education in general teaches that skill and brings it out, whether it be liberal arts, math, and science. That's a skill that's just taught. It's taught by going to school and being faced with different problems and how you deal with people in the class. And of course, teamwork's a big deal, but you know that starts way before. That's probably in the K through 6 area where a lot of that's developed.
Go ahead.
So I just wanted to kind of add something to what you're saying there, Grady, is that one of the things that we're starting to think about with our framework is a lot of the liberal arts competencies that are indicated by employers that they need, in many ways are developed very much in the workplace. You know, if we talk about teamwork, if we talk about some of the analytical skills, problem solving, creativity, these are often hard to teach in a classroom. And so I think in some ways we need to start thinking more in a hybrid manner of, you know, how much can we assess that somebody comes in with, and then how do we fill those gaps? And originally at Empire State College, the way that we had designed our self-designed studies was that students would do prior learning assessment, and it would also be almost diagnostic, and then these self-designed courses would get added on to complete what they needed. So I think when we start to look at this, and there's other models at other countries that they're really working on how to look at both assessing workplace skills and also the whole idea of placement and filling in. So I think there's opportunity here to get beyond our traditional thinking of prior learning assessment and really be thinking about how it can become part of the whole educational process.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question.
Maybe just building on that, and I guess I would start this at Grady and then maybe direct it towards Carla. As an employer in hiring somebody, what would it take for you to take one of Carla's badges, say there's a badge in problem solving, and somebody comes in with that right now, it probably wouldn't mean much to you, but what would it take to get to that point?
Actually, I think this is one of the most, so I spoke about NIMS, which is the National Institute of Metalworking Skills, and they're doing credentialing. If I see credentialing, I know that they've had that. I think badges for other things, I think is probably one of the most awesome things from it. If I get, and I get hundreds of resumes and look at resumes, they're really boring, and they all say the same thing. I mean, there's really nothing there. But badges, and especially when you can go check, you know, it's that little bit of extra that, oh, okay, so this person is connected up, and I think it's enough of an extra thing to maybe make that call to get somebody to come in for that interview. So I think whether you think it's just an idea based because we're in the digital world, I think it's a real thing that's coming. And I think people will. I think the other thing too is people are always driven for an accomplishment, and that's an accomplishment. That's a win. That's a one win as they move toward, and one win drives to another win that drives to another.
I just think Grady said it all. So I think it's a question that needs to be answered in general. One of the reasons we have a working group that's focused on workforce is exactly that. How can we make sure that there are what I sometimes refer to as the handshake between the learning and the experience? And we actually had a little bit of a conversation earlier about the idea of apprenticeships, and maybe those are also meaningful. How can we start to do that kind of crosswalk between learning and experience? I know from my own experience, I had an internship my senior year, actually between my junior year and senior year, throughout my senior year, and I learned more in my internship than I did during the other 3 years that I was going to school. And a lot of it was just application. It really wasn't about new learning. It was that now I got to apply the stuff that I had been learning all along. And I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity for badges to indicate that there's been application. So the evidence that's associated with badges does this really interesting thing of saying, like, here's all the learning, and then here's how it actually works for me. And I think that's also one of the wonders of the portfolio system as well. I think badges within portfolios is really interesting because then it presents a much fuller picture of who someone is rather than a line on a resume.
Well, that's great. I think that was a great discussion. Let's give a hand to our panel for an excellent discussion. Thanks to all of you. I think we're ready for our next panel.